what's your name?
Well, I'm Richard Morris Ramsay, born in 1934 in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Where'd you get the name Morris?
I'm not sure. There was someone the parents knew. But
Oh, that's the last name of your great-grandfather. Or first name. The first name of your great-grandfather.
I thought there was some other friend that was also named Morris, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay,
But
so...
as a kid, I was always called Dick or Dickie when I was very small. up through even into college, and some of my professors, one professor especially, said, "You're not Dick. You're older. You should be called Richard."
And now you're hardly ever called Richard.
Well, actually, a certain group in Mexico calls me Richard because when I sign my name legally, that's what they read, so that's what they picked up.
I see.
Others say Ricardo, and one dear friend, a linguist who worked quite often, many years at a university in Texas, they'll say my name is Richard, she called me Dick from the beginning, and so to her I'm Dick.
Okay. All right, how did you get to Mexico?
Well, I've got a different program here in a way. Life has been quite varied, very interesting with a lot of different projects and approaches, but to me it's all unified. And I was thinking, well, how does all this unity work? And it goes back to religion. Mother was a daughter of a missionary in Nicaragua. Dad was very strong with the Presbyterian Church always. And when we lived in Lithia Springs, Georgia, there was no Presbyterian Church, and of course no Moravian Church there. But we were active in the local Methodist Church in this small community, Lithia Springs, Georgia, Douglas County. And that's when I was sort of from finishing grade school, junior high, and high school age was there. Eventually, well, thinking about religion and where my ideas came from, very strong experience in early childhood was with the moral rearmament movement called MRA. And MRA at this point, this is in the 1930s, before World War II started. And we had, well, the MRA was sometimes called the Oxford movement because it began in Oxford University in England, and by Frank Bookman, and sometimes we were called Bookmanites. And this group had an idea of 4 standards or absolutes. There was absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute love, and absolute unselfishness. And in the mornings there would be a quiet time to get personal guidance for that day. And people would get up and the group or family would sit down and have their maybe 20 minutes of guidance in the morning, even before breakfast. And you should write in a guidance book, your own little notebook, what guidance you had for that day. And as a little kid, of course, I couldn't write. I didn't know how to do things, but I could draw. And I could draw like helping Mother with the dishes, or what I should do for that day. And that concept has always been with me, that you can hear God. God will talk to you, and you can talk to God. And I think I've always had that basic personal feeling. Eventually this, especially during the time when I was, I guess, 18 years old, it was the time to register for the draft. And I had partly this same experience of having a quiet time led me to a lot of local friends too, of Mother and Dad, who were Quakers and had silent meditation, which to me was the same thing. So I decided, I made Quaker friends in Berea. There wasn't any organized meeting there at this point, but I knew some, and I got some guidance from them, but decided to register as a conscientious objector and not be drafted for the war in Korea. And that's been a major decision in my life. Well, I ended up finishing Berea College in 1954, and instead of being drafted, I volunteered to work with the American Friends Service Committee in Mexico for 2 years. And this was called at that point alternative service and legally accepted by the government. So, I had jotted down here in terms of religion. At Berea, I was fairly active in the Union Church, a non-denominational church at the college. Well, my years in Mexico, it was great. The first year, I didn't know any Spanish, and the Friends group sent me to the Mezquital Valley in the state of Hidalgo, where there are a large area of thousands of Otomi Indian speakers. And they sent me up to a very isolated village. I had to walk about 3 or 4 hours to get in. And I didn't speak Spanish, but the people didn't speak Spanish either. They spoke their own language, Otomi, or in their own language, Ñaño. And I learned some of that, and then a couple of the guys themselves were learning Spanish. So they taught me what they knew, and I gradually picked up Spanish. But we had an international group living in the county seat of Ixmiquilpan, and we'd always meet on weekends, or sometime I'd spend a week with them, but then I'd go up to the village again for 2 years. And some of our group, came from cities or so on, and it was hard for them to relate to the rural people. But I fit right in, partly from my experiences in Appalachia and the farm and mother's background.
And you played an accordion.
Pardon?
And you played the accordion.
I had a small accordion, yeah, that someone had loaned me.
That was pretty significant too, wasn't it?
Well, it was another way to communicate with people, music. So for that year, I would sleep in the school on the floor in my sleeping bag. The teacher came from another area, another village, and he would come, and he had a cot. But I really got, just joined the village, and I would work with people in their fields and so on, and play the accordion and try to learn their songs, their music, some of their language, and made some very good friends. And some of those have been my best friends for 61 years now. And they consider me pretty much a brother, part of their family. Well, after my year working with them in that area, I was sent to another village in the state of Puebla, an ordinary farming community, more mestizo people. And we were building a school. They had 6 grades.
All right.
Go on.
We can go on.
Okay.
Might want to back up. What did we last talk about?
Well, we were talking about Alvaro's village, so San Pedro Tlaltenango in the state of Puebla.
Oh, yes.
And we were building a school. And at that point, they had only 6 grades of education in the village. And one class was held in the bandstand in the park, another was in the mayor's office, another was in the jail when there weren't any prisoners in the jail. And so it really made a difference to help build this school. Well, one sideline of this is we had one German volunteer in our group, and it frustrated him. No, you have to do things more efficiently. But no, we would take a cart with a donkey or an ox pulling it down to the river and wade into this muddy river and reach down until we could find rocks about this size and put them in the cart. And we'd carry these back up to the village and sit down with a sledgehammer and make gravel. And this German volunteer said, oh no, you know, we've got to give them the money to get by this. No, this is the way they do it. And we're helping them. We're not taking over. And I learned something from that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was successful. But for that year, during the evenings, I held a little class in English for some of the boys. And one of these boys became a very close friend, Alvaro Perez. And our birthdays are on the same day, the 19th of February, but I'm 3 years older than him. And he was 18 years old and had finished 6th grade. Now, we were not in Mexico legally as workers. We were volunteers. So we only had a tourist visa, which was good for 6 months. So every 6 months we had to leave the country and come back in with a new tourist visa. So in February of 1956, I said to Alvaro, you know, it's our birthday, I have to go up to the United States to get a new visa. I'm going to hitchhike, won't you come with me? And oh, he wanted to very much, and it took a while to convince his father and his mother that he could do that. And we got the visa through the U.S. Embassy, so we hitchhiked up. And coming up to the States, then we went through Berea. And at that point, Berea had a foundation school for the mountain kids who had never finished junior high or high school. And Alvaro said, oh, if I could only study at a place like this, it'd be marvelous. So I said, well, I think Moraim was the director of admissions at that point. And hey, let's go talk to him. Not thinking anything would come of it. But months later, during the summer, he got a letter accepting him as a student. So in the fall of 1956, it was ending my 2 years in Mexico. So I brought Alvaro up with me to Berea and got him established there.
Did you hitchhike again?
And I'm not sure. I think not. I think we took a bus at that point. I had a bigger suitcase so to bring back.
Yeah.
But at that point I had been a volunteer for 2 years, and after college I didn't have any money. So I went to work on commercial freighters in the ocean for about a year, and to help Alvaro with some of his expenses.
All three of us went on ship
That
summer.
was 3 years before.
Oh, really? You worked on ships
This was
before?
later, since I knew about working on a ship and I could do it and I could earn some money, and I had my Siemens papers.
Okay.
So that's why I easily went to work on ships that year and helped Alvaro.
Oh, that's right. We had all, the three of us had gone in 1951.
About 51.
Summer
Okay.
of
Well,
51.
this
Yeah.
was 56.
So this was.
Yeah.
So you
56.
went back to.
And Mother and Dad, I think, were living in Washington then.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And well, anyway, Alvaro ended up in 4 years finishing high school, and they accepted him to college, and he went to 2 years of college, but was really interested in music and learned to play the violin, and decided to go back to Mexico and finish up in the conservatory of his state of Puebla. And then after that he played in the local small symphony orchestra and taught English classes, and then eventually was a music teacher in grade schools in rural communities of the county. But Alvaro is very much a brother for all these years, and we still celebrate our birthdays often together on the 19th of February. So, okay, Alvaro working on ships. Well, Alvaro, after, I guess I worked on ships about off and on for a year and a half, and then took a job at the Hyman Settlement School in Knott County, Kentucky. And it was, you know, it's not that different from some of the situations in Mexico. In Knott County at that point, I think there were about 40 grade schools in the county, but mostly one teacher grade school or two teacher grade schools. I took a recreation program out to some of the grade schools, and one of the schools I had to drive a Jeep up a creek bed. There was no road, and the teacher went in on horseback during, you know, on Monday morning or Sunday evening, and stayed with the family during the week, and then went back on the horse to her own home. So this is how Kentucky was, or that part of Kentucky in Appalachia. In, well, this would have been about 1958, about then. So I always could relate Appalachia with many of the things I saw in Mexico in terms of development, in terms of the needs, and in terms of the spirit of the people, and the importance of emphasizing pride in their own culture, their own community. Well, after I left Hyman, well, first at Hyman, also part of my mission, and not just recreation, but to encourage the students to come into the Hyman Settlement School where they could board out during the week and attend high school, because there weren't roads, there were no public school buses to transport the kids. So anyone who wanted to go on to beyond the 6th grade had to live with somebody in Hyman or one of the other towns with a higher school, at least a junior high. The statistics at that time was only 10% of that generation of youngsters in the county ever finished high school. A very small amount. But of those 10% that finished high school, 50% of them went on to college, and many of those to Berea. Now at the settlement school, where we had the boarding program, I ran the recreation program, including, of course, dancing, and would bring a group of students always to the dance festival here in Berea, and that was fun. But again, I see these same basic patterns of development in villages in Mexico, and I'm still involved with them. So after I guess 3 years at the settlement school, I decided to move on, and for the summer I volunteered as a project with the American Friends Service Committee in Durham, North Carolina, and we were starting to work on some of the civil rights issues, especially employment, and we were doing a survey of the employment policies in different companies or factories around Durham. and I got to know the black community very well, and the black university in Durham. And finishing that summer volunteer project, of course, with my experience of 2 years in Mexico in volunteer projects, many of the other volunteers considered me the leader, because we had the system of having a meditation every morning, and the Quaker type of working together. Well, anyway, finishing that summer, the chap who had been, actually it was my brother John's friend, Max Hyrick from Warren Wilson College, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had been the director of the American Friends Service Committee college program in the whole Southeast of 7 states. And he was leaving that job, and the service committee asked me if I would take over the job. The idea of the service committee generally was, well, you know, you have these opportunities for somebody for a year or two, and then you move on in your career and give someone else this opportunity. Well, I started in this job, and wow, ended up with 6 years, which was rather unusual, because that was the year the student sit-in movement started in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Greensboro is where the students from AT&T College staged the first sit-in, the first 4 students that finally spread out through at least the whole South. And I ended up in those 6 years making lots of friends, but working on both black and white campuses, but with the burgeoning student movement. One of Martin Luther King was one of the key people who helped organize a steering committee for the students to give them support. And as the director of the college program for the American Friends Service Committee, I was a member of this committee. And one of the little sidelights is in talking with him, he said, "Oh, I know your parents." And at some point earlier, when he and Coretta were in Montgomery, I guess, they had to go to Washington. And at that point, Washington hotels would not admit a black person unless you wore a turban and were, a foreigner from Africa or so. And they stayed at Mother and Dad's house at one point, and Martin Luther King remembered that very much. And in visiting the universities in the different states, when I get to Atlanta, I would stay with Martin Luther King's brother, A.D. King. Later on he died in a car wreck, but again, my experience in Mexico and living with the Indians and in the villages, I fit right in with the kids. There was no problem. Some of them were amazed at me that, here I was a white person who grew up in Georgia, but that was good. Well, anyway, there was the first major sit-in demonstration in Atlanta was the fall, and that when I started with the job, I guess I forget, it was in probably September or October. And the students asked me, well, we're going to have a demonstration now. Are you going to join us? I said, of course. So here I was the only white person, and they had us, the students were great organizing. They were from about 4 different colleges around there in Atlanta, black colleges. One group was sent to a certain lunch counter in a 5 and 10 cent store, another one to another one. And Martin Luther King was with the group that went to the Rich's department store, to the Magnolia Group on the 6th floor. And this is a restaurant where our family had eaten different times. But I was sent with the group to Sprayberry's 5 and 10 cent store. And as soon as we came in and, you know, sat down at the lunch counter, the owners closed the lunch counter. And a group of whites came by and they picked up cans of hairspray and were spraying that on us. And it was funny because it was called Sprayberry Store. Well, anyway, as all the different lunch counters were closed, except Magnolia Room, then the organizers of the march, the key ones, came around and told us, okay, now it's your turn. We march over to the department store, Rich's, I think it is, was it, yeah. And up the elevator, to the restaurant, and immediately we were arrested because we refused to just move on our own, taken down a freight elevator and put into the jail. Now, here we were all in the jail, men and women separate. But finally the police came in. Hey, you're not supposed to be here. You're white. I said, you know, I came with my friends to eat, and here they brought us. So they took me out of that because they couldn't integrate their jail, and they put me in a cell by myself. But that was just for the day, and then that evening we had to go into the court with the judge, and the judge, I forget what the penalty was for the other ones, but there was some kind of a penalty. But with our group, they didn't know, dismiss this group, but they couldn't handle at that point. This is what am I talking about? 1960, yeah.
They couldn't handle having a white.
Yeah.
They didn't know, they knew they had to treat you all equally, so they just dismissed everybody, huh?
Yeah. Well, our group, they found something was a little different with our group than the other groups. But anyway, that was my first year with the service committee, and I ended up eventually organizing projects for the service committee in the South End Community Service and with Cherokee Indians, finally on voter registration, and sending volunteers mostly to very rural villages in the state to tutor black children who probably in a year or two would be challenged with interracial education, interracial schools. And especially having some white friendly people, you know, working with those children in their villages really made some difference. That was fun. I also took two groups different times to Mexico, some of the student leaders in the state, and that was great because for them to see Mexico and a whole different attitude about race. And in fact, one of the guys, Buford, went into one of the churches in I think it was in Ixmiquilpan, and there was a little statue of San Martin de Porres, a black priest, or made a saint. And some of the local people came up and saw him, and they knelt down and, you know, prayed. And he forgot, I'm a saint, I'm a saint. But, you know, there was many interesting experiences, but especially two different summer projects with the Cherokee Indians were fun. Well, anyway, after 6 years of that, it was time for me to move on, do something else, and I was hired by the North Carolina Fund, it was called, for a project that was funded by the U.S. Department of Labor for labor migration. And there were a lot of unemployed people, especially in the eastern seaboard and up in the mountains. And basically industrial factories in the Piedmont where the water came down and factories had developed first with water power. And you know, needing workers, it was the dearth of workers. Well, it ends up that now many of my Otomi Indian friends and other Mexicans I know are in that same part of North Carolina working, many without papers. but the labor migration issue interested me very much. We had to help families. Well, I was the director of reporting and wrote a major big book for the Department of Labor on the labor migration. Now, these people, you can recruit them, you can get them to work in these factories where there is labor, but you have to bring their whole families. You can't just send the man. And if you bring the whole families, the children have to learn what a stoplight is and how to use running water and bathrooms instead of outhouses and all of that kind of thing. So it was an idea of changing culture, changing habits. Well, after 2 years of that, I decided, you know, what we're doing in these projects, even with the Friends projects, the school projects, even in Appalachia, is dealing with culture. People should have pride of their own background, but culture change and development is important. So I thought I'll go to the university and I'll get some classes on what is culture and what do we know about culture and culture change. So I went to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill and expected, you know, maybe for a semester to take some courses and then see where I was going. Well, the faculty, and after writing several papers on my experience in Mexico, said, you've had more field work than many of our faculty, and you should skip the master's. You don't need a master's. You should go right on for a PhD. And we will help you get a scholarship from the NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health. So that's what they did. And it was great to have, you know, finally 3 years to read, to think, to analyze, and for the doctoral dissertation, decided, well, I ought to go back to Mexico with this Indian group, the Otomi in the Mezquital Valley. So I went one summer down to Mexico to find out if you know, I could come back to the village, and before I could even ask them, people in the village said, "Oh, Ricardo, when are you going to come back and stay with us?" And I said, "Well, maybe next year." And that's how it happened. And the government people, the major Otomi Indian himself, anthropologist, said, "Oh, absolutely, we need somebody to do more research and to write on the changes that we're trying to bring about in this culture." So that's how I got back to Mexico for a year and a half. Now, during that year and a half, I had put in my dissertation budget for the Department of Mental Health. I need an assistant who can be my interpreter for Otomi, because I speak some but not much, and to help me with insight. So Leonardo Antonio was the right one, and he was delighted. So I was able to actually take him up to the University of North Carolina for a week-long orientation, get the visi for him and all that, and that was great. He was thrilled. And we stopped in Silo first to see my parents, and I took him up to the Cherokee Indian Reservation to see some of my friends up there. And when we were in one of the houses of the Cherokee Indians in Big Y community, it was fun, because after maybe half an hour, my Cherokee friend said, "What about your friend? Why isn't he talking?" And I said, "Well, he's an Otomi from India, and they have their own language. I'm Otomi from Mexico." And they were shocked. They thought he was another Cherokee from a neighboring village. So racially, they looked just about the same. That was fun. Well, Leonardo had, at that point, I guess, 6 children. And his oldest boy, Armando, had finished his 3rd grade in his own school. That's all they had in the village, third grade of school, one teacher. And we got him into a boarding school for 1 year on the Desert Valley, where, well, it's a whole nother story about how he adjusted there, but he worked well in that boarding school. And the second year, he went back to register for the 5th grade. And they said, well, the school's going to close in a year, so we'll give you 6th grade instead of 5th, and then you can graduate. So when he graduated with only the 4th and the 5th grade of primary school, this was yet, he didn't speak much Spanish, but he had learned some. And Leonardo said, hey, Ricardo, if you're going to stay in Mexico, can Armando live with you so he can be the first from his village to ever go to junior high school? That would be secondary school in Mexico. And I said, sure. Well, I got a job then with my dissertation done, teaching at the University of the Americas in Cholula, the state of Puebla. And this is a university that had, well, it started as a university for Mexican GIs, but was developing into a very good liberal arts school for Latin America.
Bilingual.
So that bilingual, yes, by all means, bilingual. So I was one of the anthropology teachers, and Armando lived there, and with the neighbor kids, of course, none of them spoke to me. He really learned his Spanish pretty well. And in the school, it was a school of nuns that he attended. But his Spanish was still, weak. And after, usually it's 3 years for the junior high. But he needed 1 more year. He failed several courses. He failed English. And I said, why? He said, no, I don't want to work on that. I need to learn my Spanish well as my second language. And I agreed with him. Well, we had a strike at the university and eventually lost and so on, but finally when we left, what money I had, we went back to Ixmiquilpan, the county seat of where his village is, and got him in a night course to finish his junior high. And he excelled in it because of the experience he had had in Cholula for 3 years. He was a real leader of his own group. But then with only the junior high education, we were able to get him a job with pulling some strings somewhere, I must say, as a bilingual promoter or teacher of preschool children in his own village. And he did that for a year or 2 and was able to take some courses and then get graded as a bilingual primary school teacher. And then he was a primary school teacher for many years and is now retired. And close to his 6, well, he had 4 children with 1 wife, now 2 with a newer wife. And the first group of kids, they would call me grandfather, because he told them, I'm more than just a friend. I'm of the family. So that's part of my relationship with them here. Well, there's another family in the village. I was friends with everybody, but they were a bit jealous. One old man was sort of jealous of my relationship with Armando and his family. So he said, my son's about to have my first grandchild. We want you to be godfather of this child. Sure, come on, why not? Well, that's Juan Peña. So I was godfather of Juan, and after our strike and after our year back in Ixmiquilpan, so Armando could finish, I had to come back to the States to work because I had no money at that point. Well, some years later, Juan, I'd get back to Mexico at least every summer for a while and see everybody and visit and so on. But when Juan was 16 years old, this is how they did then. He had finished, by then schools were a little bit better in the area, so he had finished the junior high school level. But guys that age then would go up to Texas and swim across the river and walk for, well, it's about maybe 7 days or up to 10 days in Texas, you know, through the mountains and not on the highways.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, okay. So where did I leave off?
With Juan Peña.
Okay, Juan Peña.
He swam across the Rio Grande.
Okay. So he went up into around north of San Angelo, Texas, a little village community called Robert E. Lee. And there were a number of people from his village that had been working for a few years. And they were very good friends with the owners, the ranchers and so on. But they said that, you know, right at this season there isn't any work here. So one of the foremen said, "Oh, but I've got a cousin over in Louisiana. He has a cotton plantation for a chemical fertilizer company, and I'll call them." So he called over there, and they said, "Yeah, we could use a couple workers. We'll send a pickup truck over for them to Texas." So Juan and one of his uncles went in his pickup truck, and they were told, "Lie down in the back of the truck so immigration won't see you as you're traveling." So Juan was in his cotton plantation in Louisiana for 2 years, and on some of our, well, by then I was married. We would get down to Mexico every summer. And one time we stopped by Monroe, Louisiana to see Juan. Well, it ended up that he said, well, he started calling me on the phone up, we were up in Vermont at that point, Susanna and me, and he said that the harvest is going to come up next month. And during the harvest we have to work 12 hours a day, and sometimes even 7 days a week with no more pay. And he said, after 2 years here, I need a vacation, and I want to see where my godfather lives. Well, eventually he came up to Vermont and ended up staying with us for 2 or 3 years. First he wanted to get his driver's license. So I handed him the book in English, and he had to learn it. And first time he failed the test because they changed some of the words that was in the booklet in the actual test. And the second time he took it, he passed it. And he went to English as a second language classes at night in Brattleboro, the nearest town. And eventually worked on his GED, and much later finished those with good enough grades. And at one point my brother John was visiting us in Vermont and talking about Juan and what he could do. And John said, well, he could stay with me for a year in Berea and at first attend the local high school. So he moved in with John. I forget what year that was, probably 93 or 94. 93, I guess, was the first when he came. Yeah, 1993. And Juan was a sharp guy, but he was bored with the high school juvenile students. So they allowed him to take a course or two at Berea College at night if there were room in the classroom, in the class. And at the end of that year, which would have been at the end of the summer in 94, then they admitted him as a student to the college. And he finished the college in 4 years. His junior year, he was president of the Cosmopolitan Club, the international club. And he wanted to go on to graduate school. He majored here in economics. There are all sorts of little fun stories about him and how he related to the mountain people, the students at Berea. And he saw so many similarities with their culture and his. But anyway, he applied to several schools in the United States for a master's degree, and was turned down because his grade scores on paper were low. And he said, I'm not going to be discouraged. He wrote to 2 universities in New Mexico and never even got an answer from them. He said, I'm not discouraged, you know. I need a year to work on calculus and to earn some more money and so on. So he did that, and during that year he wrote a book on for immigrants on how to learn the right kind of English to get a better job and to get along in this country. Well, he ended up making friends with, what's the guy's name? He's at Berea, excuse me, Silo, the community is called, what kind of a community is Silo?
At Silo?
Yeah, land trust.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Silo's a land trust. Well, he made friends with the leader of the land trust movement, where, you know, the idea was to get people to register their land, that it would only be used for agricultural purposes or not. Well, anyway, that's a whole nother issue up there. Well, anyway, this guy had him live with them in a cooperative, actually in Rhode Island, and helped him get into the University of Southern New Hampshire for the master's degree. And for those 2 years, he made all A's and A minuses. And one of the years, I had him come down to Mexico for an international colloquium on the Otomi Indians in the capital. It's the Pachuca, the state capital of the university. And this is the first thing of that sort he had ever done in Spanish. And it was great. Well, going back just a little bit, I had was taught in a school for young boys who were dyslexic in Putney, Vermont, and joined the Putney meeting, their friend Quaker meeting, which was very, very good, very supportive. But after 2 years there, an old friend, professor from Berea College, had built up a number of very, very good schools on the coast of Massachusetts, north of Boston, Beverly and Beverly Farms, Pride's Crossing. And he was going to start the first school, maybe in the world, college level for dyslexics. And they were able to buy a defunct school in Putney, Vermont, where the school had been built with government funds and so on, and then it simply went defunct. So I called him and I said, "Are you the Charles Drake that I remember?" "Oh, by all means." Turns out that he was a teacher of Alvaro Paris, the other guy that I brought up to Berea much earlier. And he said, "Oh, he was one of my favorite students." And I talked to Alvaro. He said, "Oh, Chad Drake? He was a professor who had patience with me," and so on. And it's interesting how these things get interconnected. Well, so I was there as one of the founding faculty of this college for dyslexics for 5 years. And many, many stories about that. But Susanna and I decided, okay, let's do something where we can work together. We had bought a house in Putney, Vermont. It's a very small community, and decided to open up a craft store and Mexican restaurant. And we ended up getting notices in two tourist guide books: the best Mexican food you'll ever get between New York and Montreal. And we just had 20 seats. It was a small thing in our own home, but it was fun. But wow, a lot of work. And after that we decided it's time to retire and retire to Mexico, where we'd be closer to Susanna's family and her old friends, which are a very strong relationship from many years before. So we've been in Mexico now for 15 years, retired, but I'm very active in anthropology at the National University. We have monthly seminars on this Otomi and related Indian groups at the university. Then we have a week-long colloquium every year at different universities in states where there are sizable groups of these Indian groups. Now, I guess it was it 5 years ago? No, I lose track of the years. If I don't have it written down in front of me, I don't know. But decided to have the colloquium in Clearwater, Florida, because there are literally more than 1,000 Otomi Indian speakers in Clearwater, many without papers, but some with papers, some even owning a business up there. And we did that, had the week-long colloquium. I had written a book of folk stories from Leonardo, written in Otomi, and we decided to publish and translate this book into Otomi, Spanish, and English. And up there in Clearwater, we presented the book to some of the grandchildren of Leonardo, and that was fantastic, because these kids now their parents speak Otomi among themselves. In Clearwater community, you hear them speaking Otomi with each other on the street, but they don't teach it to their children in home, because the kids need to learn Spanish and they need to learn English. And the kids go to school in English. Well, now they can show their teachers this book. This is my old language, Otomi, and this is a story from my grandfather, written and translated into English. And it was a good project. But that's the kind of thing I get involved in. But involved in the language, migration. I've done visits with many of the migrants from this Otomi area in the States, in many different states, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Colorado, Texas, Louisiana, Kentucky. My godson Juan is now works with the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights in Louisville, and he's now a citizen of the U.S. and his 2 children born here. But they're up in North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, of course, even up to Chicago and New York. But this whole migration issue is fascinating, and a lot of work needs to be done on it. Also work with culture change, and the different papers I presented at these different colloquiums in the different universities were put into little pocket-sized books. And we have 2 universities now, intercultural universities, to encourage these different Indian groups, one in the state of Mexico, now one in the state of Hidalgo, to appreciate and not lose their own culture and language, but to get an education. And many of them, like in Berea, will go back to their own home areas and help development of the area. Others will want to become a doctor or a professional and move on. But that's these 2 new universities. But the other states, including Guanajuato and Michoacan, we present things at these different universities, the state university that is. And I've been publishing these little books.
And they were available at the reunion?
A number of them were, yeah, but I've got stacks of them.
Do you?
But they're great, especially for the intercultural universities, because these students who are coming from those difficult backgrounds, they like to read about Armando and about Juan, 2 different guys, but they could relate. But that's how I grew up, you know. And if they could do something that one in the United States working with human rights, but the other one stayed in his own village as a teacher, bilingual teacher, and has been a real success. But they like the size book that they can put in their pocket, and they can read it in an afternoon. So that's been a success. We're starting a new series of those little books, Voices of Gundo, so that not an anthropologist writing it, but get different people in the village to write something about their experience or their insights, and then have that as an archive of real stories of people writing from Gundo. Now, and it's not just Gundo, but it was divided into different villages, Gundo, Agua Florida, and Huacri de la Paz, which is largely a Protestant group, evangelical, Pentecostal.
And so when are you going to take the next step and go digital, and like we're doing right now?
What, the family or
these little books, put them on YouTube with live, you know, you can see the people, not just the printed words.
Yeah. Well, I get around to, I've made some trips to visit some of the migrants in the States, even up to Chicago and all.
And do you videotape them?
Pictures, not videotape.
Yeah.
No. But the most interesting thing now is communities have changed. Now Gundo, more like 12 years ago, let's see, no, more like 15 years ago, had 6 teachers in the primary school.
Wow.
Now, and because of Armando and his gift, some came from other villages because they knew it was a good school. But now, there's only 1 teacher for grade school and only 11 students. So the out-migration just in the last 8 years has meant this. But they're sending their money back and building nice homes instead of the little wooden shacks with a grass roof. And a number of these people all around, even in the village in Gundo and in other towns in Mexico, are friends on Facebook.
Okay.
So I have a whole list of these people
Yeah.
on Facebook, but I don't know how to use it yet. I don't trust it too much. But they're in communication.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, you know, Gundo or the community, it's not just the people who live there. It's these who are scattered all over,
Right,
and are in contact
Yeah.
and sharing their pictures and ideas.
Yeah.
So this is a whole other aspect of migration. And you think about the Chinese communities in the United States, now they got started and what their relationship is. There's similar things to analyze.
Yeah.
But I'm getting old, and right now I've got a project on catechism that was written to use with the Otomi Indians in Mexico 400 years ago. And this one is, because there's one in the Aztec language, Nahuatl, which has been analyzed pretty well. But this one has not been analyzed, and these originals are in a library in Paris, France. So I have a copy, and I'm writing it with then explanations
Can
and
you bring it up to the
understanding of
camera a little bit?
Yeah, understanding of the changes in the language for 400 years ago.
You can see how close to bring it. Here's the screen for you, Dick.
Well, that's my front.
Here's the screen.
This is the Holy Trinity.
Okay.
But the actual thing is like this. It's on, will be 2 pages open up, and you read it from this page to this page.
Yeah. Okay.
To see the symbols, which you can understand some, but the words are an Otomi of where somebody wrote it, some priest wrote it, 400 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's changed. So we're analyzing that and seeing the changes over the centuries. There's a lot of work to do on this yet. But in Gundo, what interests me is when I showed this to the people there, they said, "Oh, that's the god of the mountain."
There. No, this one's the god of the mountain. Okay.
Yeah, that's the god of the mountain, and this is the Son, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But to them, that's the god of the mountain.
Yeah.
Now this Batsi, that's the word Inotami for Son, and this is the Espiritu Santo, because they don't have an equivalent name, so they use the Spanish name. But interestingly, in the a similar one written for the Aztec speakers, the Nahuatl speakers, that's not the Father God. This is the Father God. So it's very clear that the Otami, after 400 years, still think of that as the god of the mountain. But then also another priest told them, no, look, your offering is to the cross on the mountain. And then other ones say, no, it's the Father God. So they say, oh, it's the same. Like the Holy Trinity is one thing. The God of the mountain, the cross on the mountain, Father God, that's all the same. Or even the God of rain, because the offerings to the mountain bring rain.
Okay.
Well, anyway, it's fun.
Thank you so much. Hey. So, and what is your name?
Juan.
Is that all, just Juan?
I'm Juan. Live in Shelbyville. Nice to be here.
All right. And how are you connected with the Ramsays?
Well, it's a long story. Richard Ramsay is my godfather, and he has a wonderful family, 2 brothers and 3 sisters, 1 sister, and lived with Dr. Ramsay in 1994. I'm sorry. Just great memories.
All right, yeah, great memories, and now, so you've come from Mexico and to Berea College.
I'm originally from Mexico. Went to Berea College, graduated in 1998. Went back to Vermont for a couple of years for a master's program, and I'm back to Kentucky. I live in Shelbyville, work in Louisville, Kentucky.
And what's your job?
Well, I work for the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. We are an agency that enforces the Kentucky civil rights laws in Kentucky.
I think that fits right in with your godfather's work. Didn't he work with civil rights too?
I believe so. He did some civil rights and advocacy, yes.
Yeah, right. All right. So, Juan, it's I know that you used to prune apple trees.
I still do prune apple trees. In fact, I have 20 apple trees in my backyard. I just pruned them.
Do you?
Yes, I just pruned them 3 weeks ago.
All right. And I think that Dick has written, your godfather has written a book about you, a little book.
A small booklet, yes.
Yes. So if anybody's interested in your story, they can go to that.
That's true. I think it's available, yes.
All right. It's in that next room right there. If you don't have a copy, you can get one. It's great to see you, Juan.
Good to see you, Dr. Ramsay.
Said you're the Great Danes.